Hello and welcome back to Living History with Ted Goldsboro, and today's guest Ed Lewis, who's talking about his grandfather named Theobold Harsch, who lived in Narberth. Ed, we were talking about around 1890,
We were talking about the beginnings of the village of Narberth.
Okay.
Which I have to correct myself. It was Edward Price, who was one of the original families. But he and another enterprising man decided to develop it into a suburban community.
Right.
Of course, it was served by the railroad. Mm-hmm. And they were building houses and selling off lots and so on. And as it developed, they had to have a fire company to go along with it. And my grandfather, Theobold Harsch, was very involved with the founders of the fire company, and he would lend his horses. And he later on he had, when they built a new firehouse, he had a phone line with newfangled electronic instruments from his house.
I see. And to use his horses in the fire.
At the alarm, a phone call would ring in his house, and he would quickly send his horses down to be hooked up to the big steam-powered pump that would drag out to wherever the fire was.
Yeah. Now, at this point, Ed, was he into construction yet, or just landscaping?
Oh yes, he was doing landscaping. But I'll get into that.
Okay.
He did go in.
Because I wondered if he could have built the firehouse.
Probably not. No,
Okay.
I think he was still in landscaping at that time. But no, about that time he bought from Edward Price. He bought a lot on a new street. It was just laid out. It's called Sabine Avenue, and he bought a 3.5 acre lot there, and it was all wooded, beautiful beach stand of beech trees, and he built a house. And he had an architect friend of his was Horace Trumbauer, who gave him the plans for the house. And it was the current style of a sort of colonial revival stone, the local mica schist stone. And he evidently cut timber and had it milled and used it. And the total cost of that house was $10,000.
Which was quite a bit.
A fair amount.
Yes. In 18...
This was just at 1900.
1900.
1900.
Okay.
And the family moved into it, and within 2 years, another daughter was born called Elizabeth, Elsie. And we have a picture of the family on the front porch, and it's the Harsch family and the Munsing family, my grandfather's sister, and her family.
And she's the one who brought over the girl who became your grandmother.
Yes, Joanna Harsch. And they all were German Lutherans, and they went to St. Paul's Church
in Ardmore.
Well, at that time, St. Paul's Church was on Lancaster Avenue. It's where the Bell Telephone Company is today. But the original church, which is Revolutionary period, is over on is that Wynwood Road?
Wynwood and Argyle.
Yeah, and the little stone church is there, and in that cemetery are Revolutionary soldiers.
And Harsches.
Well, that's was the family burying ground also.
Okay.
But they were members of that church, and of course Luther Parsons was one of the deacons of the church, and but I tell you, along about that time, the president of Pennsylvania Railroad was Alexander Cassatt, bought the rights to the old Lancaster Pike, because there was evidently somebody was thinking of putting up a trolley line, and the Pennsylvania Railroad did not want competition, so they bought the rights of the old highway and used it as a toll road, and because the automobile was coming into being at that time, and Theobold Harsch got the contract to maintain and build some of that rebuild some of the roads. And to do that, of course, you needed materials, and he, about that time, bought a piece of property down on Rock Hill Road, which was a quarry. And they would quarry stone there, and they would use it for crushed stone as a base, and then they had to put sand and gravel and pack it down with, and they had steamrollers. The big machine to roll was a steam-powered roller.
Using coal, probably, to make the steam.
Yes, but I remember the steamroller was still parked behind my grandmother's house when I was a kid.
You couldn't fire it up and move it.
No, you couldn't, but it was fun to climb on.
Yes, yes.
But he, it was good business to go into roads, and he also, I think he got into that because a lot of these estates needed driveways, and so he would be doing the thing. Okay. And he also did some of the streets in Narberth, paved the street. There are records of his bidding on paving streets and so on. But on top of materials, he also needed labor. And of course, there was the time of the great immigration wave in America. But he, having come in as an immigrant himself, incidentally, by now he had gotten U.S. citizenship and become a U.S. citizen. And my grandmother, by being married to him, was also a citizen. But he was very sympathetic to the laborers coming into that. And he underwrote for many of the Italians who came to work for him. And it's interesting, Ted, families in Narberth still are descendants of those same people.
Right. When I was a kid growing up in Narberth, we used to refer to the Italian section of Narberth.
Yeah.
Probably
well, there's still, pizza restaurants and barber shops and so on. But his association with Italy began when he left Germany and went into Italy.
Now, where would those Italian immigrants working for your grandfather live?
Well, if they were married, of course, they probably had, found a little home. He had, on the back part of his property, he had a dormitory for the single men. And
they'd fix their own food?
They would fix their own food, and I remember my mother would say that she and the brothers and sisters would love to get down there. And there was wonderful aromas wafting up.
Now, was your grandfather connected with a toll collector?
Oh, yes. He not only had the contract to maintain the road, but he also was in charge of collecting the tolls. There was a woman who collected in the little toll house in front of Mrs. Long.
Okay.
Yeah, and next to the Marian meeting. But he was in charge of collecting the monies and banking them and doing the accounting and turning them over.
So he didn't actually stand at the toll booth.
No. He was out there paving roads.
Okay. And we have an image of Rock Hill Quarry with Theobold Harsch owning 14 acres of land down there. And those quarries existed for a couple hundred years.
Well, there had been a bank panic during that period, and he didn't invest in the market or in banking. He bought real estate. And another piece of property he bought was where the Albrecht's nursery is, or where it was. And at that time, it was an open field. And Ted, that's the field where George Washington's army camped when they were retreating from Brandywine and they were on the way out toward Paoli. There's a marker there
that's right, in front of Albrecht's. Now, when we were talking about toll booths, that was not only for pedestrians and horses, but also the automobile age is coming.
The automobile was coming, and not only that, but right over here in Ardmore, there was one of the earliest plants to make automobiles, the American Automobile Company.
Auto car company.
Auto car company.
Right.
And they had, they made not only auto cars, they also made trucks.
That's correct.
Yeah. But oddly enough, you know, Ted, my grandfather, my mother always said this, my grandfather did not like that newfangled machine.
Yeah.
He was too much of a lover of horses. And for him, he would stay with his horse and carriage. But despite that, you know, about this time, the state of Delaware, with the impetus of D. Coleman DuPont,
Coleman DuPont
was one of the DuPont brothers, and he was very interested in the automobile. In fact, he later had a company to build automobiles. But he was financing what turns out is probably the first concrete road in America, and it was largely private funding and state funding, but it was to go from Wilmington all the way down to Dover. And they put out bids, and my grandfather won the bid to build a big section of this. But
he's from Narberth. His workmen are Narberth.
Well,
his equipment's in Narberth.
He had to take it all down there, and not only that, Ted, but he had to borrow money for more equipment.